Very much for joining us on today's webinar, where we're going to share with you the results from our survey on companies specifically in the IT sector across Canada. So as Christine said, my name is Rowan O'Grady. I'm the President of Hayes in Canada. I've worked in the specialist recruitment industry with Hayes for 20 years now, 8 of those based here in Toronto. And I'm also joined today by Travis O'Rourke, who runs our IT specialist business in Canada. Travis has 10 years experience recruiting into the IT sector. He's been here with us at Hayes for the last 4 years, and Travis is going to contribute his insights into what's happening in the market too. So we're going to keep you for approximately 20 to 25 minutes to share the results of the survey, and then we'll have 10 to 15 minutes left at the end for any questions. You can type your questions in whenever you feel like, or leave it to the end, but we're going to actually try and answer those questions at the end to make sure that we actually cover everything on the survey. So just a little bit about the survey before we start. As most of you know, we produce an annual salary guide which shows typical salaries paid across a selection of industries and functional areas. We cross-reference those with levels of experience and the type of company the role may be found in. The salaries are based on what we see every day in the roles that we fill and obviously from the candidates that we meet. And it's become, from what we've seen, it's really become an invaluable reference tool for literally thousands of hiring managers now across the country. And we only launched it at the beginning of last week. We've had about 2,000 requests for copies so far. So we're very proud of the success of it, very proud of the simplicity and the user-friendliness of the guide. If you haven't actually received a copy of the 2014 guide yourself, just go to hayes.ca and you can easily request a copy there. In addition to the salary guide, or the salary numbers that we provide, we also survey our clients about their hiring plans, what are they planning on doing on salaries, their business activity forecasts, their confidence in the economy in general. And this year, the survey was completed by over 3,000 hiring managers, HR professionals and business leaders across the country, across a whole range of industries. And this year, we've included 3 years of data to start to show trends in the job market, which is very interesting. And that really puts us into a position where we can see things that others can't, and it allows us to be able to provide far better, more valuable advice and recommendations to our clients. But obviously today is specifically about IT, so we've pulled out the responses from over 300 hiring managers and leaders working in IT companies specifically. So it's IT companies and service providers from across Canada. Just to set a little bit of context on what's happening in the IT job market, first of all, let's start out with the skills shortage. Salary levels, like any other monetary-driven market or monetary-based market, are really driven by supply and demand, obviously. So the skills shortage is the essential influencer on salary levels. So we asked to what level of suffering there was going on amongst our clients to do with the skills shortage. And most employers are seeing the skills shortage as having an influence. 47% of you are seeing a moderate shortage of skills, whilst 21% are seeing significant to extreme shortages. The majority of you believe that that's been driven by 2 key factors. The first one is simply too few people entering the industry. So the IT sector can now say that it's quite an attractive industry for new people to join. Maybe it wasn't as easy to say that 5 to 10 years ago, but certainly now it's seen as a very attractive industry, and you see quite a few high school graduates enrolling into programs in maths or computer science, which intentionally would lead them into a career in IT. So that's great news for the future of the industry and the future of alleviating the shortage. But that doesn't really answer the question on how to make the IT industry more attractive to not just men. Having just half of the population to draw candidates from is obviously a major contributor to the skill shortage that we're seeing now. So there's obviously a lot of good work that's being done on that topic, but an awful lot of work that needs to be continued to be done to alleviate the problem. Another element, the lack of people entering the IT job market in Canada, is to do with challenges in bringing in people from overseas. There are candidates from other countries with suitable qualifications and communication skills who would be keen to move to Canada, but a lot of our clients tell us that they see the LMO process as at times being too onerous and frequently too lengthy. And we believe there's also another element here, which is employers possibly not trying hard enough to actually make it happen to bring in people from outside of Canada. And when you look at other industries where they've been experiencing extreme skill shortage for a number of years, like oil and gas and mining, those companies are actively bringing in international talent, and that's a very normal way of them working. So we believe that this, i.e. bringing in people from outside of Canada, is going to become more and more normal for IT companies here in the next few years. The second major influencing factor is that there's almost as many people now think that the skill shortage is driven by a lack of training and professional development. So if you were to take a person with a computer science degree, for example, they have a well-rounded knowledge of IT, but for them to be able to be of real value to an employer with specific expertise in a specialized area, there is a whole lot of training, expense, time and effort required to get that individual up to a certified state and up to speed. So if you look at what can the employer do, well, the cost for an employer sometimes of investing in certification for an employee can be prohibitive. And then there's obviously the fear factor that once that person's certified, then the individual could move on to another company armed with their new certification. Individuals, what can they do? Well, frequently they don't have enough time or obviously the money available to be able to get certified, and then there isn't enough being done from or enough available for government sponsorship to be able to achieve significant levels of certification, which means we have an industry where there's a huge demand for skill sets, a good and strong number of people who would like to be able to move to the next level of their professional development, but a lack of an answer on how does this actually happen in a practical way and how does it happen in a big way to make things different. So the short version here is that there is a skills shortage, as we all know, but there seems to be little happening that's really going to alleviate it in the coming years. And I would say, and as I said, like at the start of this slide, it has a major effect on salaries. So, as I mentioned, we've been surveying our clients on the same questions now for 3 years, and we're now able to share what the trends are that we can see coming through in the IT recruitment marketplace. So let's have a look at that. I'll start out with the headline things that we have found and what we can see happening. First of all, market confidence amongst IT companies was and remains consistently high. There's a slight pattern of a disconnect when it comes to predicting hiring needs. That's more so on contract than so much on perm. And salary increases have been continuing, but they have been continuing at a lower rate, or that's the trend. So let me just talk you through each one of these points, starting with the economy in general. So we asked what people's view of the general economy was for the coming 12 months. And here's the results according to managers and leaders in the IT industry specifically. There's a clear drop-off in the number of people who believe the coming year will be worse than the previous year, from 11% last year to now down to around 6 or 7%. For people who believe that 2014 will be better than last year, we saw a jump up to 45% from the low 30s last year, so very encouraging. And there's almost as many people now saying that the coming year will be better as far as saying that it will remain static. And that's a really critical turning point. I think once we get to the point where there's more people saying that things are going to be strengthening than remain the same, we're going to see another shift in the market. But then why is this trend happening? I think to some extent it's obvious. I think it's a combination of seeing consistently good market conditions in your own sector, i.e. in the technology sector, and then you add into it better news coming from the US and Europe, and obviously the World Bank just said today that they believe the world economy is at a turning point right now, and you combine that with the good performance of the Canadian economy in the last few years, and overall it's a very positive outlook from IT folks. How about what people are seeing then in their own organizations? So we ask, each year, we ask people about expectations of business activity for the coming year and whether it's going to increase, decrease, or stay the same. And we also ask them what happened in the year that's just gone. So we can now compare their expectations for any specific year with what actually happened in that specific year in retrospect. So the great news here is that the vast majority of companies in IT in Canada, between 60 and 70% for the last 3 years, have expected and seen increases in their business levels. There's a little bit of reality not meeting expectations, but I think that's normal in that everyone thinks, well, next year is going to be even better, and hope springs eternal, and then perhaps turns out that they were a little bit overly optimistic. But either way, on the whole, expectations were very close to being met, but more importantly, the increase in business levels looks categorical across the board. For 2014 then, looking forward, very similar expectations. maybe a slight bit lower, but that could be within the margin for error. So overall there, the economy is expected to be good, people are feeling confident, business levels are expected to continue to grow. So what effect is that going to have on hiring plans? Generally speaking, IT employers are doing a very good job of predicting their perm staff levels at the start of the year. So just looking at the diagram, we can see that the same proportion of companies expecting to increase staff levels actually did in 2012 and in 2013. So the predicted increase was the same as the actual increase for both 2012 and 2013. The expectation for increasing perm headcount for 2014, if you look at that, has jumped up to now over 50% of companies. That's obviously being driven by the consistently high levels of business activity and the confidence in the economy. Also, the proportion of companies expecting to reduce perm headcount numbers has fallen each year. So that's all really good stuff. The only surprise here for us came from a significant portion of companies in the last 2 years unexpectedly having to reduce perm headcount, and there was a significant difference between the expectation and the reality. So in 2012, 13% of companies saying they expected to reduce perm headcount, but 25% actually did, and that's a little bit concerning. In 2014, similar number, 12%, expecting to drop numbers. So let's see what happens and hope that that trend doesn't continue. It's kind of flying in the face of everything else. I'm not sure whether there's anything in it, but we'll see in a year's time. Then if we look at forecasting for contract and temporary headcount, employers haven't been as accurate when it comes to predicting their temp and contract requirements, so that kind of makes sense. That's what it's there for to some extent. The pattern looks like companies largely expect to keep contractor numbers the same as last year, each year, but then things work out slightly differently. There is a trend here amongst employers in feeling that they would have to use more contractors each year, and then we can see that expectation moving from 15% in 2012 to 25% in 2014. Also, the reality of how companies actually manage their contractors has a pattern in that there's more use than expected each year. So like last year, for example, there was an expectation amongst 20% of employers to increase contractor numbers, but 30% actually reported an increase. This year, the expectation is that 24% will increase contractor numbers, but given the challenges of skill shortage that we mentioned earlier, especially when it comes to the very specialized expert level skill sets, we would expect that it could follow the same pattern as 2013, and we could see close to 35% of companies increasing contractor numbers to bring those skills into the organization when they need it. How about on salary trends? Well, we ask each year how much salaries were increased by in the previous year, and we've shown this here from 2011, plus the answer to the question of what are the plans for 2014. So you can see there's a clear movement of more companies offering increases below the 3% mark, and a reduction in companies offering over the 3% mark. And why is that? Well, our view is that during the recession, salaries were frozen, even reduced in some places for a couple of years, around 2008, 2009 really, which needed to be made back up effectively. So in the first couple of years after the recovery, certainly in 2010, maybe to some extent in 2011, there was a significant portion, over 40% of employers, offering increases of over 3%, and even 8% of employers offering increases of over 6%. So a lot of catching up there and aggressive movement on salaries in general. But the trend then for the last couple of years, 2012, 2013, has been towards a more conservative approach being applied to annual salary reviews. So there's more and more companies applying a less than 3% policy. If you look forward to what the prediction is, it looks like there's probably going to be another change, and it looks like there's going to be a slight increase in the number of companies planning on offering the 3 to 6% increase for the first time in the last 3 years, and that's obviously attributed to what we saw in the previous slides about the confidence in the marketplace. But also, I believe, and we believe, there's some pressure coming through from supply and demand of quality candidates in the marketplace, and that's going to continue. So if we now move on and we'll look at the recruitment outlook for the IT sector specifically, so I'm going to hand you over to Travis O'Rourke, and Travis is going to give his views on what's happening for the IT recruitment outlook for 2014.
Our question to you was, in the upcoming year, business activity will increase, decrease, or stay the same. Now, across the country, the outlook is very strong, with 71% of employers expecting an increase in business activity. Looking closer at a provincial level, in Ontario, 75% of companies are predicting an increase. In Alberta, 68%, and in BC, 63% of organizations are predicting activity to increase throughout the year. Now, Alberta and BC have been driven by natural resources over the last few years, and as such, they've been kind of insulated from the global pressures on industries like manufacturing and financial services. Now, in Toronto, the optimism is probably based on an expectation of a far better year in financial services and manufacturing, which is likely driven by U.S. and global economic recoveries, as well as a weakening Canadian dollar. Now, the downward pressure on the Canadian dollar is expected to drive additional international sales this year and create a more attractive environment for North American IT organizations who had previously been considering moving projects offshore. Over the past decade, it's estimated that nearly 1 million American IT jobs have moved to international locations, most notably China and India. Now, with a weaker dollar in 2014, Canada appears to be well positioned to be an attractive alternative to those organizations who remain cautious of the political ramifications of moving these jobs into international waters. If we look at staff levels, our question to you was, in 2014, do you expect staff levels in your organization to increase, decrease, or stay the same? Across the country, once again, optimism is high, with 88% of employers expecting to increase or maintain their headcount from 2013. From a provincial standpoint, in Ontario, 50% of IT is planning to increase headcount, 44% of Alberta is planning to do the same thing, and BC has the rosiest outlook, with 53% of organizations expecting to increase their IT headcount this year. BC is slightly outpacing the rest of Canada, and this is partly attributed to the excitement that's caused amongst IT service providers this year, with Microsoft, Facebook, and Amazon all planning to set up major operations in Vancouver. These organizations alone will be creating thousands of job opportunities across BC, but to be honest, a lot of the credit goes to the BC government, who have provided over 100 tax cuts over the last 8 years, which has created a very attractive environment for IT startups of all sizes. With this, coupled with the province's proximity to Silicon Valley, there looks to be an extremely bright future for the technology industry on Canada's west coast. We asked managers across the country, what are going to be your most significant recruitment challenges this year? Probably not surprisingly, 80% of organizations are expecting skill shortages to be the biggest challenge they'll face this year. But really, salary levels, the lack of people entering the market, a lack of previously existing internal resources, and a company's reputation and profile in the marketplace are all pretty major concerns across the country. In IT, more so than any other sector, organizations' worries about their low profile in the marketplace that's traditionally dominated by massive household brands is ringing true. Smaller companies tend to find it difficult to differentiate themselves, thus making talent attraction an incredibly difficult task. But certainly, all signs are indicating that a very challenging recruitment year is ahead of all of us. Now at Hayes, every year we get asked, what are you seeing as the most in-demand IT positions, and what effect is this having on their salaries? This year is very similar to last year, with all positions surrounding mobile technology leading the way. Network engineers, mobile application developers, and network and information security specialists are looking to be the most in-demand positions again this year. We're predicting salary increases of about 5 to 10% for these roles, with anything involving development or user experience optimization leading the way. The rest of IT will enjoy more modest increases of around 1 to 6%. Now, 3 to 4 years ago, mobile developers were being kept busy redesigning traditional web layouts in order to optimize the user's experience on your handheld device. But once businesses were satisfied with their mobile web presence, IT and marketing departments across the country got together to explore the need for actual mobile applications. And the mobile applications, and really it's their design and their constant redesign, are really what we're expecting to kind of drive growth across 2014. So although the demand is still massive, and it will remain the driving force behind 2014 salary increases, new technology, such as mobile wallets and wearable devices, will be adding further pressure to an already understaffed mobile workforce. In the upcoming year, salary levels, we've asked, will they be remaining flat, increasing by less than 3%, increasing by 3 to 6%, increasing by 6 to 10%, or increasing by greater than 10%. Now, nationally, it remains a great year to be working in technology, as 86% of Canadian employers will be increasing the salaries of their IT departments, and the vast majority will be increasing their salaries by less than 3%, which on a provincial level rings true in BC and Ontario. However, in Alberta this year, 45% of IT professionals can expect salary increases of 3 to 6%. A possible explanation of the differences in Alberta could be connected to the fact that Alberta was ahead of the curve on increasing their headcount over the last few years, and really their main challenge now is competing to retain staff. In Ontario and BC, we expect to see a shift towards more companies increasing salaries at the 3 to 6% level in the coming years.
Great, thanks, Travis. So we wanted to talk a little bit about staff retention as well. When it comes to non-monetary benefits, we asked questions about what was having the biggest impact on recruitment and retention, and also what were the plans for next year. And we wanted to share this with you to help you build compelling offers when you are recruiting. So we asked how much of an impact each of a selection of benefits have on recruitment and retention. The top two were career growth and vacation time. We included career growth as a benefit, as it's a non-monetary element of the attraction of going to work for a company or maybe stay at a company. So it was career growth and vacation time. Career growth is one that it's a really increased in importance over the last few years, and we think that's got to do with people's appetite for progressing, increasing as the recovery has taken place and the companies are growing again, so they want their career back. In any event, the top two were vacation and career progression, and then others that are topical, such as work from home, being seen as of neutral impact. And I think that's an interesting point, because something like that gets a lot of coverage, but then the view is that it doesn't have as much of an impact, which is interesting. We also asked which benefits employers wanted to add to their benefits package, and flexible work options like work from home and flexi hours came out on top, followed by performance-related bonuses and RSP matching. So two on the kind of work-life balance to some degree, and two more closely related to monetary compensation. And I just wanted to bring up a quick side point on that particular topic. So recently, I think it was like 3 to 6 months ago, we conducted a completely separate survey, not as part of the Salary Guide survey, but a completely separate survey of professionals in Canada and how they evaluate a job offer from an employer and how they rate the component parts. The report was called What People Want. If you're interested, you can request a copy from hayes.ca. It's very insightful. But anyway, in this survey, we asked people to rate different elements of benefits in order of importance, and vacation time came out as clearly more important than flexible work options. And the point we made in that piece was to consider the impact that focusing on increased time off would have over flexible work options and the effect it would have on people's feelings towards their work-life balance. So something to consider. And then finally, one other pointer to share, just looking at that graph about benefits that impact recruitment and retention again. Career growth is obviously very important to people, and employers are obviously aware of the impact that can have on their recruitment and retention. So we asked whether you had a succession plan in place, and it turns out that the majority do not. So 38% do, and then you've got, you know, the remaining majority either don't or are thinking about it. But fact remains, 38% do. So there's obviously a big opportunity for companies there to affect the message that's going to their employees about where they can go, where they can progress, what the opportunities will be in 3 years, 5 years' time, and start talking to people about specifics. And they could do that and affect their recruitment and retention without any additional cost. Finally, and before we see if we have any questions come through, we've got a couple of basic recommendations on how to stay competitive in the market, and how to ensure that you're building an offer that's seen as compelling by the candidates that you're focusing on. So the first point here would be a uniform approach to increases in salaries may not respond to the level of shortage for certain roles. And by that what we mean is it may be too much for some roles and too little for others. So the 3% increase might be appropriate for certain roles, but you may have other very difficult to find roles that you may be looking at a more significant increase. So we would encourage you to think about roles that are most in demand or hard to find and respond accordingly. Secondly, there is a change coming in the market. We can see a shift back towards more significant changes. So more people moving towards the over 3% mark. And moving with that to remain competitive is essential. But there is a note of caution, and we would say only one company pays the most, or in other words, there's always somebody that's paying more than you are, so don't go down the path of trying to compete on salary alone. And kind of connected to that point, there's absolutely an appetite amongst employees and candidates on the marketplace to trade salary for other things, so performance-related bonuses, increased vacation time, new challenges. So perhaps try something different and see what kind of impact that makes. And finally, which kind of wraps the whole thing up, finally, think about what makes your offer different and whether that appeals to your target market. Play the cards that you think have the most appeal to people that you actually want to attract. So for example, would you look at increasing vacation time in your offers instead of looking at offering flexible work options? So I think we have diligently stuck to the time there. I think that was 25 minutes. Pretty good. So just to remind you, if you haven't received a copy of the salary guide, you can log on to our website, hayes.ca/salary guide, and request a copy, and we'll be in touch. Or just drop an email to our marketing team, and they can help you out. And thank you very much for listening to our webinar so far. So if we have any questions, we can take them now and talk you through the answers if we can. Right, there's a question there. Is the data specific for Ontario or is it broader? And I think that question maybe was asked before we got to the piece about breaking it down into different regions. So all the information obviously is about Canada, and then we have it broken into its component parts. And you can see we've picked out probably the most populous provinces to show the difference between the different provinces, and I think you can safely say there is a difference between the provinces. So hopefully that answers that question. Do we have any other questions? We can wait for a moment.
Perhaps just while we wait, if there are any listeners on the webinar today who have any specific questions regarding any specific pieces of technology or roles, we'd encourage you as well to reach out to marketing@hayes.ca, and one of our information technology recruiters would be happy to reach out to you and address any concerns on a one-on-one basis.
Okay, great. Well, it doesn't look like it's an easy job for us. So we have, oh, hang on, just in the nick of time. Can we get a copy of the presentation? Absolutely. I think we're actually going to post the presentation along with the audio here of the WebEx. We're going to post that online, so you'll absolutely have both the presentation and our commentary that you can pass on, use for yourself, pass on to somebody else. You don't necessarily have to listen to us again. You can just look at the slides. But yes, that will be posted on our website, so you can get it there. Anything else? It doesn't look like it. If you want to contact me directly, my email address is rowan.o'grady@hayes.com with no apostrophe in the O. And Travis hayes.o'rourke@hayes.com with no apostrophe in the O'Rourke. Thank you very, very much for your time. I really appreciate it. If we can be of any help, please contact us directly. Thank you.